There we go. Okay, so good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining the class. Everybody who's participating has their text, I assume? Yes?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
All right, so we are starting in the, we're in year 2 of the triennial, and so I've selected material from the second part of the triennial, and so we begin sort of the parsha begins in the middle of a story. Isaac and his retinue are in conflict with Avimelech, the king of Gerar, and Phicol, his general, over some wells that Abraham had dug that Isaac believes belonged to him, and the Gerarites, the Avimelech and his people think that the wells should belong to them because it's on their land. And so they have a fight, and they've had a number of fights, and then he finally dwelt another well that was not a cause of conflict, and so he leaves Gerar and moves up to Beersheba. And then what happens after is that so God appears to him in a dream and says, I am the God of your father Abraham, fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and increase your offspring for the sake of my servant Abraham. Okay, and so now Avimelech and his staff come to Isaac, and Isaac doesn't know exactly why. So I copied and pasted verse 27, even though there's no Rashi on it, because it's necessary for the context. Okay. And Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, since you hate me and you sent me away from you? And they said, Ra'o ra'inu ki haya Hashem imach. We have seen that the Lord was with you. So we said, let there now be an oath between us, between ourselves and you, and let us form a covenant with you. Okay, so the first Rashi, Ra'o ra'inu be'avicha ra'inu becha. Okay, so now here really as always, to understand Rashi's answer, you first have to understand Rashi's question, right? And to understand Rashi's question, you have to at least be able to read the Hebrew, even if you don't fully understand it, okay? And so the problem, what Rashi's trying to explain, is the phrase Ra'o ra'inu, okay? Now, why might somebody have difficulty understanding that phrase?
It's sort of said doubly.
It's sort of said doubly, right? I mean, ra'inu means we have seen, right? Or we see. I mean, there's no really present tense in biblical Hebrew, right? So ra'inu could mean either we have seen, or we see. But what does the ra'o add to it, right? In other words, again, when Rashi is commenting on a word that seems superfluous, take the word out, read the verse, and ask if you notice that something's missing, right? And if instead of saying Vayomru and they said Ra'o ra'inu ki haya Hashem imach, if it simply said Vayomru ra'inu ki haya Hashem imach, right? There'd be no, you wouldn't say, oh, where's the ra'o? I mean, you would if you knew the verse, right? But other than that, I mean, the ra'o seems superfluous, right? So Rashi's explanation is that they saw it doubly, okay? We saw it regarding your father, and we saw it regarding you. We saw that God was with your father, and now we see that God is with you as well. Okay. Does anybody here? Well, Barnaby knows Hebrew well enough to understand that explanation is problematic. I don't know if anybody else does. I mean, really, what does ra'o ra'inu mean, right? Or if you can get that phenomenon, or another example of it, ra'o ra'inu.
I know.
That, go ahead, Barnaby.
I know it's an emphatic kind of usage, like motumat. That's pretty emphatic as it is. Using the infinitive and the conjugated form. I've seen. I can't really, recall any other examples. But
Bahaya im shamoa tishma'u.
Yes.
Right, in the Shema, right, in the second paragraph of the Shema, right, Vahaya im shamoa tishma'u, right, or we have all of those crimes in Leviticus, the person who does this mot yumat, right, it's a way of adding emphasis, right? So if you say, the person who does this yumat, the person who does this shall be put to death, right? The person who does this mot yumat shall surely be put to death, right? V'haya im shamoa tishma'u. If you will truly listen, right? So here, ra'o ra'inu, not simply we have seen, but we have surely seen. Right? It's a part of, there are things in any language that are not easy to translate into a specific other language. And this is one of those, right? But so ra'o ra'inu really is a way of giving emphasis. It's really not saying, it's not really doubling. It's emphasizing, right? But Rashi is understanding this sort of midrashically, right? That because Isaac is puzzled, right? I mean, like, you're fighting with me, and now all of a sudden you want to make peace. Yeah, well, we've come to understand, just like your father was blessed of God, now we understand that you are blessed of God too. Now, of course, this Avimelech is not too bright a guy, right? Because the same trick that Abraham pulled with him, saying Sarah is my sister, right? Isaac did the same thing with Rebecca, right? So this Avimelech is not too bright a guy, and gives rise to all kinds of theories that maybe the story was told about one and not the other, but we don't need to go into that. Okay.
Can I ask a question? It's a little bit tangential, I guess. Did they believe in God? Did Abimelech believe in God? Because my understanding was most of the surrounding entities believed in idols. And if that's correct, then how would they even know to say, we see how your father interacted with the Lord, we see how you interact. Why would that matter to them?
Well, all right, I'm going to try to give you a historical answer. It's a very legitimate question, right? It's a legitimate question because we approach the text with, the voice of Mrs. Fishman, our third grade Hebrew school teacher, still in our ears, right? And right, we have been taught that Abraham was the first Jew, the first monotheist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That's not in the text, right? I mean, indeed, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Abraham was greeted after he came. Abraham was greeted by Melchizedek, Melech Shalem, Kohen Le'el Elyon. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, priest of the Most High. Right? So I think it is not the case that Abraham's contemporary neighbors did not believe in the deity known by Yud He Vav He. Okay? I think what is more accurate is that they were polytheists. Okay? And so I'm just going to call the deity Hashem instead of just, or even Adonai, because I think we're allowed to say Adonai, right? It's not that they didn't believe in Adonai. They believed that Adonai was one among many gods. Okay? And so there's nothing at all inconsistent with them saying, we've seen your blessed of Adonai. Adonai exists. It's just that, when you say he's the only God, you're a Bissel Meshiga. Okay, but that doesn't mean that your God doesn't exist. Okay, and doesn't have power. It's just that he's not the only God. He's not the only one with power. I think that is a more accurate reading of it, and therefore nothing inconsistent about them thinking that he was blessed by God, blessed by this particular deity.
Right.
It's just that they would not have agreed with him that he was the only deity or the all-powerful deity. Okay, so that's a great, it's a great question. And like I say, sometimes, I mean, when you do this kind of study, two things happen at the same time. One is that, and this is why it's fascinating to study these texts with Christians, okay? Because we sometimes don't even realize how Jewishly we view the text until we study it with people who are not Jewish, who have not learned with the same sort of presuppositions that we have. At the same time, that also means that sometimes we have to unlearn what we've learned or banish our presuppositions and come to the text as if we're seeing it for the first time rather than remembering Mrs. Fishman and I still remember my third grade teacher was Mrs. Fishman. So I don't know why, Helene Fishman, I don't know why that popped into my head, but it's a long time ago. So thank you for your question. Okay. All right, let there now be an oath between us. Let the oath that has existed between us from the days of your father be now also between us and you. I don't think that really adds much to our understanding of the text. Okay, and then they say, if you do not harm us as we have not touched you, as we have done with you only good and sent you away in peace, so do you now, blessed of the Lord. Okay. Kasher lo niganucha. We have not touched you. Okay. They're saying we didn't do yes, we said go away, and we made a separation between us, but that didn't do you any harm, right? That didn't do you any harm. And so now we would like to sort of formalize our treaty. Okay. And who was it? Was it Robert Frost who said good fences make good neighbors? Right. And there are a lot of cases, particularly in Genesis, of people who come to the conclusion that they can't live together, and so they peaceably separate, right? I mean, Abraham and Lot being the classic example, right? They had too many flocks, too many sheep, too many goats, and they were dwelling together, and there were not enough resources for both of them, so they decided to separate, right? And that idea of when people can't live together, they separate. That's a perfectly fine thing. Now, of course, they are living in a world really of finite resources, right? I mean, particularly, herders, right? I mean, when the land is overgrazed, it's overgrazed, right? When the aquifers have dried up, the aquifers have dried up, right? And therefore you can either, fight over scarce resources, or you can, right, you can, move on. For us, it's a little bit more complicated, right? Because the world is running out of resources and running out of unexploited places. Okay, so I want to look at the second part of the verse. And again, here the Hebrew is really important, right? So I'll do the whole verse only so there's the context. In ta'aseh imanu ra'a, if you do evil to us, ka'asher lo neganucha, for we have not touched you, v'cha'asher asinu imcha rak tov, we have done with you only good, v'neshalchacha b'shalom, we sent you away but in peace. Ata baruch Adonai. Okay, so this last ata baruch Adonai, and first of all, I remember some of us discussing this once. Why are there two letters with the same sound? And I said it's really not. The ayin has a different sound than the aleph, and most Ashkenazim can't really pronounce it. And then I said Barnaby pronounces the ayin really well. So if you want to give us why don't you read the last four words of that sentence so we can hear how it's really supposed to sound.
Ata Baruch Adonai.
Right. So there's a different, right? The ayin has like a sort of a guttural sound. I mean, which sometimes, I mean, some languages hear that as a G. Like if you look at Gaza, right, which in both Hebrew and Arabic is really Aza with an ayin, but in English they heard that as a G. Okay, so that's why it's Gaza in English, even though it's Aza. So ata with an aleph means you, and ata means now. Okay, so it says, you now blessed of the Lord. Right, so Rashi is trying to explain what this means. You now blessed of the Lord, because if you read it again, I mean, because Hebrew and English are different languages, and if you read it, especially because there's no present tense, you could read ata baruch Adonai. It could also read, you are now blessed of Adonai. You are now blessed of Adonai, which makes no sense, right? Because they're saying, we've seen that you've been blessed all along. So Rashi is explaining, no, it means you to do this, right? As we have done such and such, you now, blessed of the Lord, right? You now do these things that we have done, right? Live with us in peace, good fences make good neighbors, etc. Okay, skipping ahead. All right, Esau was 40 years old, and he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Bosmat, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. What? Right. So now it's interesting. They're all, these patriarchs marry pretty late in life. They marry pretty late in life. Isaac also married at age 40.
But look how long they live.
Well, yeah, they lived a long time, right?
Yeah.
They lived a long time, but still, you would think. But so Rashi's going to explain this, okay? Esau was compared to a swine. As it is said, the boar from the forest gnaws at it. The swine, when it lies down, stretches out its hooves as if to say, see, I am a clean, kosher animal. Okay, this is a kind of well-known midrash, okay, that again takes a little bit of unpacking, right? A four-legged animal, right? What are the criteria by which we know that it's a kosher animal?
Cloven hoof and chew your cud.
Cloven hoofs and chew the cud, right? So the pig has cloven hoofs,
Right.
but it doesn't chew the cud, right? So the Midrash says the pig likes to lay out in the sun with its front feet stretched out. So you look at it and it says, see how kosher I am, right? And the pig wants you to think it's kosher, but it's really treif, right? Just like people who want you to think they are pious and good and honest and upright, but they're really ganefs, right? They're really ganefs. Okay, so what does that have to do with Esau? So do these, the chiefs of Esau, rob and plunder and then pretend to be honorable. Okay, during the entire 40 years, Esau kidnapped wives from their husbands and violated them. When he was 40 years old, he said, my father married at 40, I too will do the same. Right? In other words, right? So this was all a sham. He wanted to look like he was good. He wanted to look like he was good, but he was still the same, thief and rapist and so on and so forth. Okay. Any comments on this particular Rashi? Marcia, you have a somewhat of a troubled look on your face.
Oh, not really. It's just the explanation just seems a little from the midrash or what? Yeah, from the midrash seems a little exaggerated maybe, or far-fetched. I don't know.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that the Esau of rabbinic tradition, right, is not necessarily the Esau of Genesis, right? I mean, there's a whole thing that happens with Esau, right? Esau becomes Edom, right? Esau, I mean, that's biblical, right? Esau is the ancestor of Edom,
Right.
but Edom in rabbinic literature is a code word for Rome. right? Because they can't really, while they're living under Roman occupation, say openly what they really feel about Rome, right? So, but if you are in the know, and when they're talking about a dome, they're not really talking about a dome, they're really talking about Rome. Okay, and then Rome, and then because of Rome being the capital of Christendom, right? So Esau becomes a dome, becomes Rome, becomes Christianity.
So it's a biblical dog whistle.
It's a biblical dog whistle, yeah.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, look, I would say that Esau in the Bible per se is not necessarily the most admirable person in the world, but he's not the monster that the rabbis made him out to be.
Agreed. That's
Right?
what
And
bothers me about that.
right. And, you know, from my perspective, it should. I mean, you know, particularly as we live in a different era, right? I mean, you know, look, there is no question, that you know, the word gospel means good news, right? And that the good news has historically been bad news for the Jews, right? There's no doubt about it. Going back even to my grandparents' generation. I mean, we have a story in our family. I don't know if it's true or not. Okay, but my father's father was one of 6 children, but only 5 of them made it to the United States. The 6th died in his childhood in Ilya, which was part of the Russian Empire. As far as Jews were concerned, Ilya was in Lithuania. Today, if you look for it, it's in Belarus. But you know, we all have these stories, right? So the story is that the only doctor in their town was Russian Orthodox, was a Christian. And I guess he would have been my great uncle as a boy, got sick, and it was during Holy Week. And as an act of piety, the doctor did not treat Jews during Holy Week. So he died. Right. Again, is it true? I don't know. I mean, I know it is true that my grandfather had a brother who died in his childhood and didn't make it to the States, right? That is definitely true. Right. But you know, so right, and how many of us, you know, our parents or our grandparents, whenever they had to, you know, walk in front of a church, right, they crossed the street and spat, right? I mean, Tom, probably not your grandparents. Not Kelly's grandparents either. But you know, there is good reason for that. But that's not the reality today. That's not the reality today. I mean, you know, it's a different era. And so we should not forget the past. We shouldn't live in the past either, right? And I mean, you've heard me. I don't have to give this sermon again, right? But so I think we have I would say even a moral obligation to understand that the midrashic picture of Esau is historically conditioned and should not be applied either to the actual figure of Esau nor indiscriminately to all Christians today. Okay, but he married these Hittite women, you know, in an attempt to become respectable. And actually, it, you know, just jumped into my head. How many of you have seen season 4 of The Crown? on Netflix. Okay, only Toby and me. You must watch it. It's really, really good, right? But
The
what?
most recent one?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. No, I still, no, I didn't
No,
know.
yeah, season 4 just premiered this week,
No.
right? And I'm not giving anything away to tell you that Charles was not really enthusiastic about marrying Diana, right? But his mother in particular sat him down and said, "This is what you are doing. This is what you are doing," because he was in his 30s, and it was simply expected that he would marry a proper, respectable wife from the right family that would, be acceptable to the public and make him look good, right? And so he did it. Didn't change who he was. Did not change who he was in the least, but the appearance was really important, right? So that's kind of what Rashi is saying here. Okay, so but even though Esau sort of in a false bid for respectability married these two women at age 40 because his father had gotten married at age 40, it didn't work, right? They were not acceptable to Isaac and Rebekah. They were defiant, they were rebellious, and they worshipped idols. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, Rabbi, what you've laid out here, well, yeah, it's in order. We can see that by the numbers, but I guess I had always assumed that we had the whole incident with the birthright and, which should have gone to Esau, but he was tricked and all of that. And then later that's why he got the attitude he did, like, I don't care about you people. I'm going to marry these Hittite people. I know you don't want me to. And that's when he started to get angry. But that's not right. I mean, I have it backwards. Am I right?
No, you don't have it. You don't have it backwards. What you're doing, which again is not uncommon because it's the way we were taught, is that these were two separate incidents, right? There was the incident of the birthright, which was before what we're reading.
Right.
And then there's the business with the blessing. The birthright and the blessing are not the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
What the birthright is in Hebrew is bechorah. Okay. In other words, they had primogeniture. Okay. And I think in how they still do, actually. I mean, according to halacha, we don't generally follow it, okay? And the question of whether we're obligated to because Dina de Malchut, but whatever. I mean, if people were to make their wills purely halachically, the oldest son would get a double portion. And that's the Bechorah, okay? And Esau is the Bechor, right? He was born first. So Isaac, he didn't really trick him. I mean, it was a deal, right? It was a deal. Now, you could quite legitimately say he didn't act in a fair or proper way, right? He may have swindled him, but he didn't, I don't know. I mean, he acted in, right? But that's the birthright. That is the inheritance of property. And now we're talking about the blessing, which is more like a spiritual, right? A spiritual.
Okay.
And this is why, I mean, and this is a pattern in Genesis all along, right? I mean, why are we talking about Isaac and not Ishmael? Right? Ishmael was also the older son, but Isaac is the one who is the spiritual heir, right? And then Jacob is the one who is the spiritual heir of of Isaac, right? It's and the way this plays out, I mean, to get back to the portrait of Esau, because it's not unrelated. I mean, if you look at the history of Christian apologetics, right? You have in Genesis this pattern of two sons, and the younger one supplants the older,
Mhm.
right? And the church has historically looked at that pattern and said, yes, Israel was beloved of God, but then God rejected the elder and chose the younger, us, right? And that's why we're now the true heir. And look at the pattern, right? Is it not Ishmael who's the heir? It's Isaac. It's not Esau who's the heir. It's Jacob, right? It wasn't really until the 60s that they sort of gave up that idea, right? But that is a definite pattern. I mean, if you were to give the book of Genesis another name, you could call it the book of dysfunctional families.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's for sure.
You know, it really is. Okay, so now let's look at the story of the birthright. Okay, which I have to say that, again, very hard to unlearn what you already have learned, right? But if you were to look at this story, with tabula rasa, I think it would be troubling. I think it would be really troubling, right? And so, and Rashi, of course, does not want it to trouble you, because Rashi is the great defender of the rabbinic midrashic tradition, right? So let's see what he does. Okay. It came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called Esau his elder son, and he said to him, my son. And he said, Hineni, here I am. Okay, right? We've heard that word before, right? Abraham says it before the Akedah, for one thing. Okay, now, why are Isaac's eyes dim? Okay. Rashi gives us, I would say, 2.5 different explanations as to why Isaac's eyes grew dim, right? One is because Esau married these two Hittite women, and they were idolaters, right? And as part of their idolatrous worship, they burned incense, and the incense was bad for Isaac's eyes, and that's why he started to go blind. Okay, because of the incense burned by Esau's two Hittite wives. Okay. Second explanation, which I don't know, is fanciful but kind of nice, is that this is an artifact of the Akedah, right? That Isaac lay bound on the altar, and the angels were watching this, and the angels were crying. the angels were crying over what was about to happen, and the angels' tears fell into Isaac's eyes, and that's what led to him going blind in his old age, right? Gail, you're making a face.
Well, I would, number one, he was old. He had cataracts.
Our next generation.
And the other thing is, maybe in his old age, but if the angels teared in his eyes, he should have been blind a lot earlier.
Well, not necessarily.
Unless it's cataracts.
Not necessarily. I'll tell you something. I had a professor in rabbinical school, Talmud professor, Ben-Sion Wacholder, who was born in Poland, and he spent World War II posing as a Polish Gentile, right? And that's how he survived the war, which was remarkable because he was yeshiva bocher, right? He studied in the elite yeshivas of Europe until the Nazis conquered Poland, and then he was able to survive the war by posing as a Polish Gentile, but he had lost his eyeglasses and he could not safely go to an eye doctor to get new eyeglasses. And he became blind in his old age, and he was told by the ophthalmologist that having gone for several years when he was a young man without his glasses is what led him to become blind much later in life. Because before, by the time I knew him, he was basically blind. But in earlier years, fascinating career. Came to the States, was ordained at YU, and then went to UCLA and got a degree, a PhD in classics, and he knew everything. He knew Ben-Sion Wacholder. He knew everything. I mean, you could, the classic thing in yeshivas is to take a pin and stick it in the Gemara, and a person who really knows can tell you every word that pin is passing through. And Wacholder could do that. But he also knew all of Greek and Latin literature, all of it by heart, but he had read it when he was younger. So, yes, do angel tears have the same delayed blindness as going without your eyeglasses for 5 years because you're hiding from the Nazis? I don't know. But it's not, but because of my experience with Professor Wacholder, I don't see it quite as far-fetched as you do.
Oh, well, hearing loss, when I lost my hearing at 40, my father attributes it to stuff I did when I was in my 20s. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's possible. It's just that I would think that angels' tears would work a lot faster.
That boombox will do it every time.
Oh, yeah, angels, right. All right. A third explanation: to enable Jacob to take the blessings, okay, which is not really much of an explanation, right? In other words, why did he go blind? He went blind because it was part of the story, right? He went because it was part of the story. If he didn't go blind, Jacob wouldn't have been able to take the blessings, and therefore it was necessary for him to go blind. But it doesn't really give us a mechanism. It just gives us a sort of dramatic explanation or literary explanation. He says, "Behold, now I have grown old. I do not know the day of my death." Okay, which I mean, it's true of everybody, right? And obviously, you know, the older you get, the more you face your own eventual mortality. But Rashi wants to teach us a little sort of moral, ethical lesson here. Okay. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha said, if a person reaches the age of the death of his parents, he should worry 5 years beforehand and 5 years afterwards. Okay. In other words, what Yeshua ben Korcha said is that you are most likely going to die you are most likely going to attain plus or minus 5 years of your parents. Okay. I don't know, Kanahara, my dad's 91, almost 92. You know, but his father died. He didn't even live to be 60, and my father's mother died when my father was 17, so 16 rather. So I don't know how that works. But anyway, so that's the assumption. So you should start worrying when you're like 5 years younger than the age that your parents died. And Isaac was at that point was 123 years old. And he said, perhaps I will reach the age of my mother, and she died at 127. And I am thus within 5 years of her age. Therefore, I do not know the day of my death. Perhaps I will die at my mother's age and perhaps at my father's age, right? In other words, but, you know, Isaac is like, you know, I'm 123 years old. I'm old enough to start worrying about posterity, right? I'm old enough to start worrying about posterity. And you know, look, as we saw in the Parsha last week, right? Abraham didn't worry about the fact that Isaac was unmarried until he thought that his own death was approaching, right? That you start to, you know, you start to feel more, you start worrying more about the future. Okay. Rebekah overheard when Isaac spoke to Esau, his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt game to bring it. Okay, again, you have to, let's look at the Hebrew, right? So he went, Vayelech Esav Hasadeh Latsud Said Lehavi. Esau went to the field to hunt game to bring. Okay, so, right, so again, I mean, Lahavi, to bring, you could say it's a superfluous word, right? If I'm going to hunt game to bring, no, what? No, I'm going to hunt game to leave it to rot in the field, right? Of course I'm going to hunt game to bring, right? But Rashi breaks this up into two different categories. He went to hunt, right? He went to hunt, but it was intention. He was going to bring back meat, whether he was a successful hunter or not successful, right? So he went to hunt, and if he hunted and killed, great. And if he didn't manage to get anything, he would just steal an animal from another farmer. Okay, that's what to bring it was. Okay, now I don't know that is the actual pshat meaning of the verse, right? But again, it fits in with the rabbinic, what do you want to call it? I mean, the rabbinic almost slander, the rabbinic denigration of Esau. Okay. Rebekah said to Jacob, her son, I have heard your father speaking to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me game and make me tasty foods, and I will eat, and I will bless you before the Lord before my death. All right. With his consent that he will approve of what I do. In other words, she's telling Jacob what she heard. She's telling Jacob what she heard Isaac say, right? That I will bless you with God's approval before I die, right? Meaning what? His desire to bless Esau was conditional, right? Was conditional. If God, like when you say, I mean, I have a habit of saying God willing, right? But if I ask myself, do I really mean God? I don't know. Maybe it's just a verbal habit, right? But so if we were to rephrase it, so Rebecca is saying to Jacob, your father said to Esau, go bring me game, and God willing, I will bless you. Okay, so now why is that necessary? Why is it necessary to emphasize that Isaac said, that he would bless Esau with God's approval?
Maybe because Esau had been so difficult, and he married the Hittite women. I don't know. That certainly didn't make his parents happy. I'm not sure what God's view was about that.
Right. No, but I think. I mean, I think that's only part of it. I mean, here's how I read that. Okay. If you look at the pshat, right, what Rebecca and Jacob have done is simply deception and theft, right? But the rabbinic tradition has no problem with what they did, right? So if she says, Isaac said to Esau, I will bless you if God approves, well, God didn't approve, right? God didn't approve, and therefore what she did wasn't wrong, right? In fact, you could say it was almost right. It was almost a tikkun, right? Isaac wanted to do something that God really didn't want him to do. So Rebecca fixed him, right? I mean, there is this whole idea. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the woods, right? But there is this idea that we want to do the right thing, but sometimes we don't know that we want to do the right thing. So we have to be made to do the right thing, but we're really doing what we want. We just don't know it, right?
Well, doesn't it come back to the birth of the twins when God tells Rebecca that the second one who's striving to be the first, and he will. Yeah, the second one, Jacob was the second child, the second of the twin, and
Right.
that the two when the two in the womb are fighting with each other, there's going to be war, and the second one is the one who will, I guess, he implies or says something. I don't remember where the second one will be the one who will continue the line.
I don't know that he says that.
He doesn't say that, but you get
No, he says Rav Yavod Sair, the elder will serve the younger.
Yes, that's
but
what
then the elder will break his yoke.
Yeah.
Right. But I was going, so we're going to go a little over time. That's all right. According to halacha, right, a husband can divorce his wife and it has to be done willingly.
Mhm.
right? If it is coerced, it is not valid, right? And yet, a lot of halachic codes bring down that the Beit Din can have the husband flogged if he refuses to give his wife a get when the Beit Din decides that he should, right? And there have been cases, even in the United States. I mean, there are rabbis sitting in federal prison right now for having hired people to beat up recalcitrant husbands to force them to give their wife a get. And so here's the question. If all of the codes say that a get has to be given willingly and not coerced, how can they at the same time say that it's permissible for the Beit Din to have the husband flogged until he agrees to give a get? How can those two things live side by side?
Can't see.
The husband does want to give his wife a get. He just doesn't know that he does. Okay? The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is preventing him. So the Beit Din beats the evil inclination out of him, and then he does what he wanted to do all along. Right? And so Isaac really wanted to bless Jacob. He just didn't know that he wanted to bless Jacob, right? So Rebecca helped him realize that this is what he wanted to do, and helped him do what he really wanted to do all along, right? Which, if you're a married man, you understand this perfectly, right? I mean, how do I know what I want to do until my wife tells me? Right? But that, I think, is what she's doing. So I'm going to rush through this a little bit. So she says, go to the flock and take for me their two choice kids, and I will make them tasty foods for your father as he like. Kach li misham. Take for me from there. Again, so Rashi says, why does it have to say kach li, take from me? You could just say take, all right? But she wants to emphasize that this is not a stolen kid, right? That these kids are hers, okay? That Isaac, in their ketubah, Isaac said she gets two kids every day. Okay, so these kids are hers. It's not theft. Okay. Now, why two? Did Isaac really eat two kids? I mean, right? That's kind of a big meal, right? Two whole kids, right? No, he only ate one, but the other was for a sacrifice. Okay. And why a kid? Because the kids taste like deer. Right? I mean, most obscure foods taste just like chicken, right? But goat and venison taste very similar. I'm gonna have to take Rashi's word on this. I don't know. Has anybody here eaten venison? Have you also eaten goat?
No.
Do they taste similar? I wouldn't say so. Venison is like I only tried dried venison before. I never had it fresh, so to speak. But venison definitely came off as gamier and had a stronger taste compared to goat, which just tastes like lamb, really.
Right. Okay. I actually, come to think of it, I've had both too. I've forgotten that I had venison. The late lamented Lavana's restaurant in Manhattan, she served all kinds of exotic foods. Anyway, Isaac said to his son, how is it that you found it so quickly? And he said, because the Lord your God prepared it before me. Okay, and Isaac said, please come closer so that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. Okay, because essentially, right, according to Rashi, Isaac is actually starting to get suspicious, right? Because he says to the one who comes really quickly, right? Wow, you came really fast. And Jacob, in the guise of Esau, says, oh yeah, because God helped me. And Jacob is saying to himself, is this Esau? Right? Esau, so from all of a sudden, right? So already the seed of doubt is planted. Okay, now I don't know. I mean, I don't know that Esau wouldn't have given the credit to God, right? But that's what Rashi says. Okay, so Jacob drew near to Isaac, his father, and he felt him, and he said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Hakol kol Yaakov v'hayadayim yedei Esav. Right now, this is a well-known phrase, right? And you could use it in other contexts too, right? Like, you talk like X, but you do like Y, right? I don't know. I don't know. Hakol call Bernie Sanders v'hayadayim yedei Ronald Reagan, right? Right. The voice is the voice of Bernie Sanders, but the hands are the hands of Ronald Reagan, right? You sound like a social, you know what I mean, that's just one example, not to indicate any political leanings. I'm just trying to think of two people, who are, far opposite ends of the spectrum, right? He did not, the voice is the voice of Jacob, and Rashi is saying he's not saying it's the voice, he's saying the language, that he speaks like Jacob. He speaks like Jacob. He's polite, whereas Esau would have been, harsh and sort of guttural. All right. He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy, like the hands of his brother Esau, and he blessed him. And he said, are you indeed my son Esau? And he said, I am. Vayomer atah b'nei Esav, vayomer ani. Right? He said, I am. He did not say, I am Esau, but rather, I am. Right? And in the Hebrew, right, it's even, are you Esau? He said, I am I. It is I. Right? So he wasn't really lying. Right? He wasn't really lying. He didn't say that he was Esau. He said,
it's me.
Right, it's me. Are you Esau? It's me. Right? I mean, it's an implied lie, perhaps, but it's not an explicit lie. Right? It's another way of trying to get Jacob off the hook that he didn't really lie. Okay. Thank you for sticking it out a little bit longer. Any quick questions or comments?
I don't have a quick question, but I'd like you at some point to address this verse 2 and 27. I do not know the date of my death and how that may connect to pre-need arrangements.
Okay. All right. You'll have to remind me at some point. It was a good question.
Okay. Saturday morning.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lila Tov, everybody.
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.